Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are 2/3 of Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
The listeners out there, I just want to make you aware that I have spent the last 10 minutes listening to George chew into the microphone.
It's revolting,
to get
isn't
ready for the show. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. So I'm here ready to go. I've got my articles all lined up here. I'm ready to get into the politics of the day. And all I've been listening to, I'm like, George won't even talk to me. He's just eating this muesli bar, chewing into the mic aggressively.
That's not fair. I was talking to you. I wasn't staring deeply into your eyes as I chewed a muesli bar. There was interaction. You make me sound like a sociopath who's just pulled up alongside you at the bar.
That actually literally happened to me today in the car. I had some guy stick his head out the window and say something about, "Do you want to be my daddy?" I think it was. I just looked at him and he looked at me. I was like, "Are you going to say that again?" And he said it again. And then I just drove off and I gave him the finger as I drove off. I was like, "I'm not."
Do you want to be my daddy? In what sense?
I don't know. He was like a young'un who was having a good time, and I was not in the mood for that.
Hang on.
I just spent the last 20 minutes unpacking a box for an egg chair, which wouldn't fit in my car. So we had to unpack the egg chair and put the individual items into my car to make it fit. Anyway.
You're talking about one of those egg chairs like the ones that you have out on the deck or something?
Yes.
And it's like egg chair is probably actually a pretty good way of describing it. I think we get
it's like a little egg, yeah. It's what you sit in.
But it's a chair, and you sit in it.
It's a chair.
Is it one of those ones that's suspended from a thing?
No. So it's on feet. And anyway, I don't know how we got on to someone calling me daddy, but that was the weirdest thing that happened to me today.
So he pulled up in a car alongside your car, and he asked you, "Do you want to be my daddy?"
Well, he was sort of behind me, and then I had the window down, and he had his window down, and he was laughing away and making a joke, and then he said something, and he started to creep up as the light went, and then said it again as he got to the intersection. And he's the passenger, and he's like looking out the side, just looking at me, and I looked at him. I was like, "Did I just hear you right?" And then he just said it again, and I was like, "Nah." I drove off and gave him the finger. I'm not dealing with this.
There's two things there, because like that could definitely be like someone who is in need of parental guidance, and you seemed like, a dad.
Maybe I seem like a dad.
I think there is a potential that this person was a homosexual man and was trying to engage you in a sexual way. Yeah.
Potentially. I don't know about that. I think he was just having a bit of a laugh, as it were.
Having a laugh.
With the lads in the car because I'm cool. And I just wasn't in the mood for it after having my egg chair unpacking debacle. But here we are today. We're on a podcast about newsy type stuff and things.
As you can tell.
Not about George chewing and not about me unpacking egg chairs and getting slightly creeped out by people in cars. We've got a few things to talk about today, so we should probably get cracking and get into it.
No, I think we can spend a bit more time in the egg chair, I reckon. What sort of
color
it's
on the egg chair.
Like a wicker basket?
It's like a wicker with some powder-coated steel. Yeah,
Has it got like a cushion in it, or like?
Of course, you got to have a cushion. What are you, a psychopath?
I don't know. I'm curious about this egg chair. So
yeah. No, you can come and sit in it one day. Assuming you don't move to Croydon, I'll never see you again.
What are we talking about here?
We're talking about other stuff.
So this is a podcast about news and related things. And big news of the week. Keen-eared listeners of the program will know me as somewhat of a Australian rules football fan, and there's been big news in the Australian rules football arena this week regarding Hawthorn Football Club and its relationship with First Nations players. Obviously, I know all about the story because I'm like a massive footy pie. I'm obviously a massive fan.
Name one AFL football team.
Team Essendon.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. No, that's one. Yeah, tick. Yep. There you
Hawthorn,
go.
that's in this.
Yep. Yes.
Fremantle is also a team.
Yep.
St Kilda. I want to say Brisbane Lions.
Yep.
St Kilda.
You're not just naming. Yep.
No, I know North is one. That's yours. North.
Yes.
Melbourne?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Okay. We he's not completely bereft.
Is there a South Melbourne? Port Melbourne. There you go.
No, there is no Port Melbourne. No, that's
okay.
a fake.
Don't worry.
It's a VFL team. Anyway, so yeah, it's pretty bad. This story. It's not great.
It is one of I'd say probably the grimmest story that you've ever posted in the chat. I'll be completely honest with you. But just for the listeners, Adam, why don't you for those who don't love football as much as you and I, why don't you give them a little bit of a background as to what's been going on at Hawthorn?
Well, so Hawthorn have been, throughout between 2008 to sort of 2019, well, one of the best, if not the best team in the league. They won 4 premierships between 2008 and 2000, I think I'm going to say 16, including the famous three-peat. They won 3 grand finals in a row. And they were coached by a man named Carlsen, who is regarded as perhaps one of the best coaches, if not the best coach of all time, potentially, given that record in that space of time.
Cool.
Now, that's the setting for this team. Now, they have, in the past, there's been little issues with players, Indigenous players, First Nations players, having sort of criticisms around then president of the club, who I think he's recently stepped down, Jeff Kennett, a former Victorian Premier as well. And there was some stuff about that, and I know Hawthorn, are trying to be better at some of that stuff. So they commissioned an external review to have a look at some allegations that were made by family members and past players of the club who are First Nations people. And this external review was really to look through all that and sort of see what the story was and to see what happened. Anyway, so this external review was handed to Hawthorn, who read it. They freaked out a little bit, and I think handed it handballed it straight to the AFL Integrity Commission, because it was obviously.
I'm just imagining
pretty serious.
The president and Hawthorn gets the report, and it's like, all right, just going to pop that down, slide that across the table, and never open that again. That's terrifying. What we've just seen is truly, deeply, profoundly awful.
So they've handed it to the AFL Integrity Commission, and the AFL has now started a process to look even further into it still. So it all came to light because the AFL had this report for 2 weeks, and then the ABC, a reporter by the name of Russell Jackson on Wednesday the 21st, put this story out there, which basically outlined what was in the report and the major sort of thrusts from it. And what the article, and therefore the report also, were basically saying was that Alistair Clarkson, his assistants at the time, Chris Fagan, and some of the heads of player management, a gentleman by the name of Jason Burt, player development manager is his title, these guys systematically across a number of years with different players who were First Nations players, basically, how do I phrase it? They basically coerced these players to remove themselves from their families. In one instance, they basically encouraged the partner of one of these players to terminate their pregnancy for the sake of the player's career. There are other allegations around coercion of removing SIM cards from phones, changing numbers, and not being able to talk to their partners, and moving out of the home and staying with members of the team for so-called the betterment of their career. So there are 3 players in particular, and the families of those players that have been interviewed as part of this report and as part of the article. And they've all been sort of, their identities haven't been revealed for the sake of privacy and obviously sensitivities around the situation. But yeah, it's obviously, these were young players at the time. We're talking sort of first 3 years into their AFL career. And effectively what's happened is and it's not just some random at the bottom rung of the club. Like in some instances, Alistair Clarkson and Chris Fagan allegedly went to these people's houses, grabbed the player, got their stuff, said he's breaking up with you, and removed them from the home. in one instance. And look, we don't know the full circumstances around it, but the statements from the women in particular who were part of this of what formed the core of the report. And obviously the stress that it's taken on these people and the players as well. It basically ended up destroying their careers, and it also ended up destroying these people's families. In one instance,
isn't it kind of like a classic abuser move to separate people from their families and support networks? Like, isn't that
100%.
exactly the thing that like the shitty husband does to the shitty abusive husband does to his wife in the in the daytime movie? Like, isn't this like classic abuser behavior?
And it's just so weird because like we don't know, the other players have come out since said we didn't know this happened. We had no idea this was going on. So, but it's happened a couple of times according to this report.
And notably to Indigenous players and not
Indigenous players.
Yeah.
I mean, well, that we know of at this stage. And even if you want to, if you take the Indigenous aspect out of it, it's still fucked. The fact that it happened to Indigenous players and they were targeted means, one, it's systemic racism.
Yeah.
The second part of it as well is it's just the cultural insensitivities around it are just mind-boggling, and they didn't
the idea that a group of white coaches forcing an Indigenous woman to abort her pregnancy against her will,
talking her into it to be like, oh, this will be good for him, trying to convince them that this is.
But I mean, the way I read from that initial part of the report was that they sort of made it seem like it was the player's idea, and then it was only she sort of inquired further and got a little bit more information, and then it was actually it turns out it's their idea, and he sort of they took his SIM card, gave him a new SIM card, sort of basically.
Yeah,
I mean, orchestrating this whole thing, but the whole idea of white men controlling the reproductive rights of black women has significant historic resonance. You know what I mean? This echoes a very, very gross part of Australia's history that should probably should definitely not be repeated.
Yeah, and everyone has heard about the stolen generation and what that and the trauma that's caused. You would be bereft in Australia if you did not know about some of this stuff, and they've just gone and done exactly the same thing with players.
In all fairness, my Australian history. Let me summarize Australian history for you as taught to me by my Anglican private white boys' school. It was settlers landing peacefully. They just saw a country and said, "Terra nullius, this earth belongs to nobody, and so we'll have it. I'll have that." Federation, early 1900s. Australia becomes the Australia that we see and recognise today. Mabo, Indigenous land rights in the 1960s, and giving Aboriginals the right to vote far too late in 1969, and current day. Everything's all sweet. Nothing happened in between.
Oh, nothing happened.
Don't worry about it.
Burke and Wills. It was all good.
Maybe a bit of Burke and Wills. Someone tried to go from Sydney to Melbourne, and then a bunch of people died along the way. That's that's a fun one. Ned Kelly. Maybe a bit of Ned Kelly.
Oh, Ned Kelly.
What's this picture I've seen of Aboriginals in shackles? What's going on there? Nah, so you're worrying about it? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about that.
Too hard.
You just skip ahead to Mabo and we're all good.
Now, to be fair to the accused people in this report, they did not get a chance to give evidence, comment on
give their side of the story. I don't know what the other side of the story could be because
I don't either.
I'm doing my darndest to give you the benefit of the doubt here, but it seems like if you are strongly suggesting, I would say strong arming someone into having an abortion, I don't know what the other side of that could be. There's
also oh, you know how you're living in this apartment with your girlfriend?
Yeah, you're not living here
anymore.
Move
out of that. Yeah. You're not living here anymore. You're living with this other guy.
Yeah.
And we're taking your phone.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to live with one of the assistant coaches now, I decided.
Yeah. And you can't talk to her anymore.
Any other workplace, you'd just be like, I obviously quit. You can't make me leave my internal reproductive decisions are none of your fucking business. It's just so bizarre, the entitlement.
One of these ladies, she So that she was pregnant, and then this whole situation happened. This is not the one that was. I think it was implied that they should have an abortion, but she decided to go ahead with the pregnancy, and then she actually miscarried. And then he didn't know about this. She'd been going through all this by herself without any support. And then the coach just sort of walked up to him one day at training and was like, "Oh, by the way, yeah, you're such and such as the lady is your partner, ex-partner is miscarriage. She's all good though. Don't worry about it.
She'll be right.
She'll be right.
Walk it off, champ.
Walk it off, buddy. Go kick a footy."
It's almost as though racism is institutionalized and systemic and pervasive in a number of different organizations all across the country. It's almost as though Australia as a country is steeped in racism, and this just pervades everything that we do in every respect, and leaving Indigenous Australians intergenerationally historically disadvantaged. But that can't be it. It must be the woke agenda that's wrong.
Yeah. The other layer on top of this now is that Chris Fagan, who was the assistant, is now the head coach of the Brisbane Lions, and they're quite a successful team. We played well into finals this year. And the other one, Alistair Clarkson, just signed with my team, North Melbourne, for a big pile of money on a 5-year contract. And he was big publicised as the best, big get, going to turn the club's fortunes around, all this kind of shit.
Neither here nor there, Alistair. What are the exit clauses in that contract? I'm just going to be quick. Just curious.
Well, apparently there are things like signing bonuses and stuff that he allegedly got, which are all sort of undisclosed. So basically, Chris Fagan has stepped down for an undetermined amount of time to focus on the inquiry. He welcomes the inquiry. Alistair Clarkson has done something similar. He's delayed his start date, the start of November, so he can now work with the AFL, who have appointed basically a 4-panel, committee, I guess, to look into it. The question for me is there anything criminal in there? And maybe not criminal, but there's definitely some stuff there in terms of workplace relations it's
certainly, I would say,
broken,
like harassment and bullying.
Coercion.
There's coercive control as a crime is now a thing that is being legislated in a number of states. So I don't know, is there anything more coercive than forcing someone to have an abortion that woman that I was describing, who had the first child and then did in fact have the abortion for the second child, says it was one of the biggest regrets of her life. And she was constantly questioning the process. And I don't know how else it could be. I can't think of a more despicable thing to do to another person is to force them to do something like that with their own body that they don't want to do. I don't know the full circumstances around it, but I think the fact that it happened to 3 players and it's not just a one-off, and then there are also, there were earlier rumblings, as I said, and that was for separate reasons, allegedly around Cyril Rioli and Jeff Kennett. The fact there's been a few different things that have sort of happened at Hawthorn, it makes me, it sounds systemic throughout that period, or as a course of action. I'm sure it's fine now. I'm sure it's all good now.
The report was commissioned by the club, so it sounds like there's a...
Yeah, but you don't commission a report if everything's going great. I think it's it sounds like it's a broader societal thing, but it's also something that's specific to football. I mean, look at Adam Goodes and that whole affair in sort of 2013. Where he was, being abused, and called racist slurs while he was playing, and that now famous photo of him pulling his jersey up and sort of pointing at his skin, and that whole sort of controversy that surrounded that. I mean, it
might be thinking of Nicky Winmar potentially who did
maybe.
that.
I thought
Nicky Winmar was the one that Adam Goodes also had issues. There was a whole thing around it.
It was called a racial slur and all that sort of. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, like I said, I'm actually not a massive football fan. I know my excellent my imitations earlier might have fooled some listeners, but believe it or not, it's not something that I pay attention to closely. But there have been documented national news stories for years that racism within football is a thing. Is my point.
Yeah. And the AFL keeps saying it'll do better. They have their 13 welcome for countries at the start of every game, and so they should. But whether or not the clubs are actually implementing any of this stuff at the coalface in terms of the way they engage with the sensitivities around First Nations people, given that there's quite a few of them in the AFL.
Okay. So I was just looking it up. So Nicky Winmar did it, I guess, on the field, and then Adam
Yes.
Goods subsequently did like what looks like a sort of preset photo shoot, also doing that, sort of, I guess, referencing that Nicky Winmar moment. So I think that's where I was confused there. But it's not good.
Pretty bleak. But the grand final went ahead, so who gives a shit, George? Don't worry about it. It'll all come out in the wash. Footy, the Herald Sun. I think this will have actually far-reaching effects and will probably actually affect the competition next year.
I wonder to the extent that reports like we can uncover wrongdoing and trash behavior and potentially criminal behavior at one club, but I don't know that this really does anything to. I don't think Hawthorn is the only football club with racists, or the only organization in Australia with what is it under what policy can we put together that actually helps to insulate players and other kinds of workers and employees from this kind of treatment in the future. That's the important thing to me. It's like, we can have an inquiry, we can unearth all the bad stuff that happened, but what are we actually going to do about it? Right?
What are the recommendations going to be out of it, and are they going to be implemented, and such and such?
As we all know, with commissions and recommendations, they're always implemented in full, as we can see from the Royal Banking Commission in 2019. 1/3 of which of the recommendations have actually been implemented. So, thanks. It's desperately sad, and thanks for taking up 20 minutes of the show with it, Adam. Thank you for that.
No, all good. Now let's keep it light and fluffy.
Light, just super light and fluffy.
Super light. So next one here. So if you're an Optus customer, you're about to have identity theft committed upon you. Yeah, cool.
So this week, Optus was hit by a cyber attack that has compromised customer information. They said in a statement. Information that may have been exposed includes customers' names, dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses. There's also ID document numbers such as driver's license, passport numbers. So what you want to do is you want to change your name and your passport number. It's got to be at least 8 digits long.
Yep.
It's got to have a
change
symbol.
Your gender if you can.
Yeah, ideally change your gender. And obviously you want a name that's complicated. And obviously not a name that you've used anywhere else.
So and with special characters in it as well.
Yeah, you got to have a special character. So like a hash symbol or an exclamation mark. So rather than
George ...
rather than
exclamation mark
George, I'll be George with an exclamation mark.
George 1.
George 1 and George 1 2 and then George 1 2 3. So this is obviously horrendous. And the pathway by which the attack was allegedly perpetrated was it wasn't like some sophisticated Russian hack. It was like there was a reporter on Twitter who was alleged to have made contact with the hacker who's asking for $1 million in order to prevent the release of this information. But then there's also been reports that information from the hack is already circulating on the dark web for sale. It was just like an open API port, basically. It was just like there was a connection into Optus service. It was just a door to the back of the IT infrastructure that was just unlocked, basically, more or less, as I understand it.
It was to do with their what do they call it? Their test environment, I think, wasn't it? Which still had connections to real data.
Which is literally the point of a test environment, is that it's separated from the other stuff so you can test. It's not, there's someone who works in, I work in IT. As someone who works in IT, that is the whole point of a sandbox environment, is that it's separated and you can do this sort of stuff and it doesn't affect production. So you have two separate environments, one for playing around with stuff, testing, learning, developing, and then another, you run, we're doing these upgrades, you're going to run them in the sandbox. And then once we know that there's no errors, everything's going fine, then we'll roll it out to the broader production environment.
It's pretty silly because passwords weren't actually compromised. It was just personal
Well, as
information.
far as they're
You can go
aware.
and change all your logins, but it's not going to do anything. And
Yeah.
this I come from personal experience of this. I've had, and my partner has had, we've had identity stolen where they've got the driver's license number, the passport number,
Yeah.
and then they've gone to a bank or, in my case, it was the Centrelink, and they've said, "Oh yeah, I'm Adam. Yeah, can I have $1,500 for a COVID disaster payment?" Or if it was my previous partner, I go, "Oh yeah, I used to have a credit card with you guys. Here's my identity. Can I reactivate that credit card?" And I go, "Oh yeah, got all your details on the system. Yeah, we'll just click go and send you off some, because we're so interested to get you to business. We'll just all of a sudden issue you a $50,000 limit on this credit card."
Something which really concerns me is that all this data, it says that it purports to affect potentially up to 11 million customers, Optus customers, and I'm sure that includes former customers. It's not just like people who are currently a customer with Optus, because if you're a former customer, there's stuff in the database about you that I'm sure that they've held, at least for a certain period of time.
Yeah, so, they are required to get rid of it after a while. But I think it's like 7 years or something like that. They can hold on to it. So
potentially anyone who is an Optus customer, as well as people who have previously have been Optus customers, are also vulnerable. And like you say, there's nothing you can do. Like, you can reset your password, but like if they got your driver's license number and they've got a key identity documents information about you and your date of birth and your gender and all this sort of stuff, like you can file for stuff based on that. You don't need into a bank. You don't need a password.
Or not ring. A lot of this stuff happens over the phone, actually. Sorry. So, like, obviously, if you go into a branch, for instance, at a bank, or
they'd ask you to present your ID.
They present your ID, but if you're on the phone, all you do is you just have to read out the number, and then the software will do a verification check based on that number. Because the logic would be, well, what are the odds of them having a name, date of birth, address, identity document number, and some other piece of information?
Well, the odds are pretty high if they've been stolen. It is very problematic, and that's an effort that's known as human engineering, and that's always the weakest point of any organization, is when you get someone on the phone and you convince them to give you information or to do something for you based on the human element. Like, because there are generally procedures and stuff in place to stop people from doing this, but the weakest point in any system is always the humans. And like, there was this one example I saw, I forget where it was, but it was a woman. She's like a cyber security expert, and the reporter was sitting across from her, and he goes, "I've got all my stuff on two-factor. Like, you can't hack my shit, basically." Two-factor authentication being like, you get a text message to your phone that confirms it's you before any action, like before it allows you to log into the service or whatever. And she's like, "Okay, give me 10 minutes." And so she gets on the phone. She starts talking to his bank, saying she's his wife and he's out of home, and like, "Could you just do this quick thing for me?" But like, there's urgency in her voice, and like, she's got an audio of a toddler like crying in the background that she plays on her computer, and like, she sets this whole soundscape up to be like, "Oh hey, sorry, I'm just dealing with a baby. Like, my husband asked me to get this thing. Can you just?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, no." And like, within like 8 minutes, she was in his account, like controlling his account, locked him out of his passwords. Like, that human level of human engineering that happens constantly.
Yeah,
because it's the weakest point in the system. Like, going up against a firewall and doing some Russian hacker shit, like, that's really hard to do. It takes a whole infrastructure and trained people.
But if someone's really eager to, like, do great customer service and really help people out over the phone, if that's their job, then they're not always going to be aware of it. Like, in my partner's case, like, we actually managed to get a recording of the phone call she had made to one of these banks. And the guy was, like, he wasn't being negligent, but he definitely could have made a few more checks to just verify what was going on. And it was very weird. The whole thing was very weird. But yeah, it was one of those things. They're just trying to do their job, but in doing so, they are at the forefront of basically a war at the moment, if effectively. And I don't think a lot of people are necessarily aware of that in terms of what they're being trained for.
There's huge amounts of money involved in identity theft. I mean, you steal someone's wallet. Yeah, maybe you get the $50 in cash, the emergency $50 note that they have in there in case of emergencies. No one's ever, I haven't used cash in about a year and a half. But like, the emergency $50 note, I don't know, maybe you can get something out of that. That's something. The credit cards, they'll probably work for a day until the person figures out they've lost it and they cancel those cards. Maybe you can make a purchase in the meantime. But if you steal that person's driver's license and you can file for a brand new credit card with a $20,000 limit and loot that, that is way more valuable to an identity thief than the 50. Your wallet is meaningless in that exchange. It's the identity theft that's the real source of value for these criminals. So
the only thing you can really do, I think, and they've sort of said this in the article as well, is you've just got to keep an eye out. Like, just keep an eye on your bank accounts, keep an eye on particularly your credit reports. So you can get, in Australia, you can get free credit reports. I think it's about 2 or 3 a year or something like that. And there are about 3 or 4 credit reporting agencies that you can get them from. So you just sign up, create an account with, say, Equifax, and then they'll give you any information where people have been
Equifax, no issues with their data being hacked famously in the past. Trust Equifax with your data, certainly.
There are other ones as well, but like basically I've got one here, and it sort of goes through, and they basically indicate anyone who's been making or any credit applications. And that might be a home loan, it might be a credit card, it might be, in some cases, quick lending money apps you can get, like Wallet Wizard or whatever the fuck it's called.
Like payday loan sort of thing.
Yeah. So that will all come up, including in some cases, I think, as well, stuff to do with your phone potentially as well, or maybe even utilities in some instances. So it's good to just, if you think you've been breached like this, it's good just to keep an eye on that, because you won't get notifications when a bank's processing these applications necessarily, because they'll change all the information so you won't be aware of it. But it will come up on the credit reports. So if you can see that some inquiries are being made and you're not doing them, then that's a good way to start following it up. Unfortunately, the problem is with following it up is that we're really bad at having stuff done about it. So what happened to my partner was that she identified it. She got the credit report and went, okay, well, what do I do? I'll call the police. And the police go, okay, well, great. That's pretty sad. Sorry about that. You've got to lodge a report online with the cyber crimes database, basically. So you lodge a report. It gives you a case number. You go, okay, can you follow it up now? And they go, probably not. Unless there's something significant there, like where, it's you are the one impacted and there's an offence that they can really string up. There's not a whole lot they can immediately do. What ended up happening was that Elle had to call each bank and be like, yo, on the 23rd of January, you had this transaction number where someone's ordered a credit card. That wasn't me. And then they go, I'll put you through to the cyber guys. And then the cyber guys at the bank go, oh, yes, okay, sorry about that. And they'll clear it, and then they'll update your credit report. But you have to do that for every single instance. So if they've done 6 banks, you could spend 3 weeks back and forth with each bank trying to prove what's happened. You have to give them the case numbers. It's you end up as the individual. The crime isn't against you necessarily. It sometimes is, depending on what the situation is. But sometimes with a lot of these credit theft things, it's just you're not the one that's having the money taken from you, but you are the one who has to then clear your name if you want to get a house loan 3 months down the track. And it's fucking annoying.
I'm like, Mr. Tsipos, I see. Well, it seems like you got a bit of a heroin addiction there, buddy. What's going on? You've been buying a lot of. It just says black tar heroin on the credit. Oh, that's weird.
And even if they're they're applying and the applications are getting rejected because maybe you haven't got 100. They haven't got 100 points of ID. They've only got
your credit score still gets dinged. Yeah.
Your credit score still gets dinged. So you've got to go through it, even in the ones where they've tried to do something stupid. And anyway, you've got to go through it. And it's really annoying. And there are other instances as well of people, having their identity stolen in other ways where they do get access to your personal accounts and credit cards and other stuff and that's also just as bad. Normally with credit cards, it's okay because you can just call the bank.
You're sort of covered. They've got insurance policies for all that sort of stuff. I mean, my mum had her credit card stolen recently, and she went. The police are like, "Hey, can we have this information because this person's committing fraud, and we want to track them down, and we don't want to have to go through the process of getting a warrant to subpoena this information from the bank. Essentially, could you just give it to us?" Mum's like, "Yeah, sure." So she goes to the bank, and the woman's like, oh yeah, you don't have that credit. You don't have a credit card anymore. You got a new credit card. And Mum's like, yeah, no, I know. That's the reason I got the new credit card is because I canceled the old one. Someone's still trying to make purchases on it with a stolen credit card. That's why I need that information. They're like, oh, but you've only got one credit card. She's like, yeah, I know I have one now, but I want to get the information regarding the previous one. The previous card. And she goes, you don't have a previous card. And Mum's like, I did have a previous card. It was previous to the one that I have now. She goes, no, you've only got one credit card. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ. Jesus Christ. Because the bank systems are not set up to be really helpful to you in this instance, because what does NAB care? NAB doesn't care. As long as they know that the or Combank or ANZ or any one of these institutions, they don't care that the credit card's fraudulent and someone's committing crimes. As long as the money's not coming out of their pocket anymore, they're like, great, done, the end. But it's like there's people out there committing crimes and they need to go to jail for committing those crimes. Currently the system is not incentivized to really help out with that sort of stuff. And there's a real problem in that we're increasingly moving to digital first banking. And I know this because I'm doing a assignment for my MBA, which is all about digital banking. So I can speak authoritatively on this subject. I'm basically an expert. We'll
get you a little byline down the bottom of the screen.
a little chyron down the bottom.
Financial expert.
George Tipos, cryptocurrency / digital banking expert. I'm not an expert. This is not financial advice. As stuff increasingly goes digital, like the home loan process, my wife and I refinanced our home some time ago, and that whole process occurred digitally. I mean, granted, it was during the pandemic, so I'm sure things are a little bit looser, right? But the meetings that we had with our mortgage broker and stuff were over Zoom. The documents they sent to us were via DocuSign. Like, the information we provided was like screenshots of various balances and things like that, and documents that are just JPEGs, right? As all of this gets digitized for ease of use, it also leaves the way open for cyber criminals and identity thieves to get access to this information and, make similar applications on your behalf. Like, it does seem like there's no really good solution for any of this. It's just like, let's make everything fucking digital, fucking get on the cloud, hey. And everyone's like, great, okay, I guess that makes sense. And they're like, what about all these problems with the cloud? And everyone's like, peace. It's like, well, how do we manage? Like, before, you had to go into a bank. You had to sit down with Edward, the bank manager, and you had to sign a piece of paper, initial here, read this, and I'm going to talk you. You're going to spend a 45-minute. My first, the initial mortgage for the house was like that. You had to go to a place and sit with a guy, and you had to show him all these documents, and they did, certified copies of all these. Like, all of that's gone now in a lot of instances. So, and it's to the benefit of banking consumers, right? You can just easily pick up refinance your mortgage, go to another institution, get a better rate. Like, there are benefits to it, but there's also a lot of costs, and I don't think we're really sort of pricing that in.
We're just not. It's the concept of technology has moved on, but the legal framework hasn't caught up, which is it's always been the case with.
We're not ready for the digital age. We're just like, we want to fire 300 people and replace them with robots, and so we're going to do that. That's
tough.
That's the level of analysis that seems to be going on at the moment. So,
so for anyone with Optus, I just recommend getting a credit report and just checking that every once in a while. But a lot of this stuff, like, the thing is with this information is that it may go onto the dark web and it'll sit there for sale for however long. It may not get sold straight away. You may get sold in 6 years, 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
And then you won't know until 4 years down the track. Like, it sucks. And
it's one thing, protecting your internet identity in terms of unique passwords and that sort of stuff. But this is it's so outside of your control. There's literally nothing you can do other than keep an eye on what's going on through credit reports. There's literally nothing you can do about it.
Or just taking it all offline to go in and, even then,
the banks still. My nonna always said, the banks are not good. The banks they are no good. And I was like, Nono, do you have cash hidden under your mattress? What's going on there, Nono? Every time I go and visit as a kid, he just give me like a big box of coins. I'm like, thanks, Nono. He's like, there's only like $13 in there, but like for a child, I'm like, think of all the Chupa Chups.
Redskin.
I'm a millionaire.
Cool.
You know, like, there really is no option in the 21st century to be like properly unbanked. But yeah, there doesn't seem like there's any really good ways of protecting yourself from identity theft. And
the other thing as well that's really annoying is that to get a new driver's license and a new passport, it's actually really hard. So a passport, if you have to, I had to change my passport number. I had to fork out $300 just to get a new passport number.
Yeah.
I can't cite the report that this has happened and get it for free. It's like, no, tough tits. You've got to pay for the
passport. Is $300. That's what it costs.
And for the driver's license, they needed from memory for my partner, they needed an actual police report. But the police wouldn't give her a report until
oh my God,
they had enough evidence to actually document it. Anyway, there's a whole
catch-22.
Yeah.
So you know who I blame for all of this? Gladys Berejiklian. Because she works at Optus now. Yep.
That's yep. Okay, I'll just say yes. I don't actually know what's going on with it.
We haven't said anything that's defamatory yet. So let's keep it that way.
Not yet. Speaking of court cases and stuff, Australia got fucked over, or not fucked over. We fucked over some other people in the Torres Strait who are also Australians, as it were.
That sounds right.
Yeah. Anyway, so United Nations Committee has found that the Australian government has failed to adequately, I can say that word, protect the Torres Strait Islanders
adequately.
And violated their right to enjoy their culture and lives by failing to act on the climate crisis. This is a landmark decision, and it's found that they should be compensated.
Or a C-mark decision now that, given that most of the low-lying island that they reside on is now underwater. So
that was a geography joke that he just made.
You know, people come, they come for the dick jokes. They stay for the chat about geography and interest rates.
Yum, 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 yum. The UN Human Rights Committee comes more than 3 years after 8 adults and 6 children from 4 low-lying islands off the northern coast of Australia lodged a complaint against the then Morrison government, claiming that it had failed to take adequate action to cut emissions or pursue proper adaptation measures. So it's interesting because it's the UN Human Rights Committee that have set it. So there's like no enforcement measures to actually for Australia to
be forced to cough up any money or
forced
anything.
To do up. Right. But what it does say is that if the UN Human Rights Commission here has done that, then it could happen in other areas. It could happen for other islands. It could happen in other countries. It sets a precedent. And
the precedent being that if you continue to ravage the world with climate change and not put in any adaptation measures, you will be responsible for the things that happen to your citizens as a country, which is like kind of no-brainer stuff. It's like if you ruin the world and people get caught up in that, you should be responsible for the world that you ruined. It's kind of a basic sort of fundamental legal principle that they're operating on there. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a great decision as to what it actually means for Torres Strait Islanders and what they'll actually get out of the government as a result. It's
probably not much
yet to be seen, but
the thing is, like, the Torres Strait it's part of Australia. Like there is an independence movement in that area actually growing, but there is like the Australian taxpayer, they are Australian taxpayers. We have an obligation to them as much as they have an obligation to us. So while you've got the Port Phillip City Council here in Melbourne will put up coastal barriers along, and make sure that erosion and those kind of things are all being looked after.
Yeah,
the same would apply.
The people that live in the beachside suburbs of Brighton are going to be just fine, right?
Yes, exactly.
those people are going to be okay. The people that live, in Port Melbourne, along the coast in St Kilda, they're going to be just fine because there's a lot of money there, and they can do mitigation measures and things like that. The people that are going to get properly fucked out of this are the ones that, of course, people of color and the least fortunate. In a stunning change of pace, it's people of color that are going to be on the wrong end of this for a change. So
yeah, it's found that Australia have violated Article 27, which is the right to culture, and Article 17, the right to be free from arbitrary interference with privacy, family, and home, but not Article 6, the right to life. Australia's Attorney General, this is the new government, Mark Dreyfus, said the new Labor government was committed to working with the Torres Strait Islanders on climate change and stressed the complaint was lodged under the previous government, as they well would. So I guess the proof will be in the pudding in terms of what they actually do about it. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if we're engaging with the Solomon Islands and New Guinea and other countries, we probably should be looking in our own backyard just as much, I would have thought.
Yeah, you'll notice the title of this article is Australia should compensate Torres Strait Islanders for climate crisis failure, UN says. The operative word is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this sentence is should. They should. They're probably not going to, but they really should. So I'd love to see. I mean, we know that the Albanese government under Labor is more serious about tackling climate change than the Morrison government was. More serious in the sense that they are serious at all about it. But I'm not aware of any, certainly I've never heard part of any major party platform to compensate people for, climate change issues like this. I don't think any major parties are on board with that. I don't even know if the Greens has got like a policy platform on that, although of the parties, I think they'd be most likely to. Climate refugees, climate reparations are going to be a thing in the future. This is in the next
10 to 20 years. They're going to have to
soon.
be.
It's happening. I mean, look at all the people that have been displaced by the floods in Pakistan. Like, we've already got climate change refugees. The question is, what are we as a society going to do with these displaced people? I guess maybe the government's response is, let's ship them over here. We need some cheap labor. We need some more people in there to prop up the property market.
No housing to put anyone in.
No. That's fine. No, but if you could come over here and work for peanuts, that'd be ace. We'd love that.
Yeah, great. Anyway, that's fucked. Speaking of also fucked, going international, Vladimir Putin has lost his marbles, I think.
Where did he? Well, the thing is, it's always. I've got this theory about finding things. And it's always the place that you think the things are is exactly where they are.
Yeah, well, he thinks he's left his marbles in Ukraine, apparently.
Very good.
He's trying to find his marbles.
Yeah, he thinks he lost his marbles in Donetsk, and that's why he's invading.
Very, very focused on that. So the Russians announced this week that they're going to start calling up reserves, and they're going to do what they call a partial mobilisation, which basically means they're going to force 300,000 people to join the military. And these are people, they're saying, with previous military experience to help, I guess, stem the bleeding, so to speak, in terms of how the war in Ukraine is going. And we spoke last week about some of the losses and other things that have been happening there, and as well as Ukraine's counteroffensive, which has been quite stunning. Now, I think
they say that it's only people with previous military experience, but I'm already hearing documented cases like this woman who's a Russian journalist. Her husband, who's never served in the military, didn't even do the compulsory sort of military service when he grew up, sort of thing. Has 5 kids, is a journalist, has no military experience whatsoever, has been forcibly removed and conscripted into this war. So I'm sure that just because it says people that are former military, doesn't mean they want to go to war, and doesn't mean that even that they are former military. They just kind of sounds like they're scooping up a lot of people. It's a very wide net that they're casting there. So
yeah, they haven't really worked out the kinks in the system by the sounds of it. They've just rolled the dice and said anyone on the birth date of this day within these years will come. But I don't know. The reason why he's doing this is because
he's losing. Because he's a
losing.
loser.
And they've decided that Ukraine, the elements of Ukraine that are still occupied by Russia, the Donbass and Luhansk regions, they will have referendums.
And not snap, totally planned normal referendums to decide whether they want to be part of Russia. Normal stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to be part of Russia? Like, yeah, with a gun held to their head.
Yeah.
And look, to be fair,
please don't shoot. I want to be part of Russia.
There probably are like a lot of the Luhansk region. There are a lot of Russian speakers in that area. So like, there is a possibility that they may well vote in that area. But like, it's not,
and especially when there's been a little gentle ethnic cleansing, and and people that are enemies of Russia have fled, and all those. Like, there's no way that this is a fair and accurate referendum. And even if it were, this is not how like countries are decided. Like, you can't just annex a place and then take a vote. Like, it's not how it works.
A lot of these regions, have a lot of people in those regions have probably fled over the last 6 to 8 years because of the civil war that was happening. So you can't hold a gun to someone's head and say, oh, we're having a free and fair referendum when they're under occupation. It's coercion. Even if the result was to be, even if it was done somehow, ethically correctly in terms of the way they counted all the votes and then released them honestly, even if it's not,
it's a fig leaf. It's a justification that you can turn around to the international community and go, oh, see, they wanted to be part of Russia. Like, I'm not invading. They're just joining us out of their own free will. Ignore the tanks, obviously, but
the issue being, though, of course, is that if what Putin said is that if they do say, if what he said in his speech was that if Russia is attacked, if Russia is threatened, and any territorial incursions occur against them, that they will respond in full force. And he also mentioned
his videos are getting extremely unhinged. So he announced this partial mobilization. There was a sort of was like highly anticipated, like, oh, the live stream. I was getting messages from people like, oh, Putin's going to announce. So it's all this sort of highly anticipated live stream starting in 20 minutes. And then the live stream starts and it's just like, here are some new ambassadors. And it's just like a bunch of like, I don't know, sort of like Russian international diplomacy housekeeping measures. And then it's like, oh, by the way, we're doing a partial deployment. Like, just by the way, it's just unhinged, these videos that he's doing, saying that
I don't know if they're unhinged so much.
The West is attacking him, and any attack is we've got lots of weapons to reply to any the West is not attacking Russia. Like, let's just be 100% clear about that. The West is helping Ukraine defend itself, and I don't care what warped sensibilities that you have around that. You could be the most. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't actually believe that Russia is under attack from the West, because NATO is not firing on Russia.
He believes that NATO is trying to.
NATO is supplying weapons and material and resources to the Ukrainians in order to defend themselves. That is not the same thing as the West going to war with Russia. And that's how he's trying to frame it, as though it's this epic Soviet Union era struggle between the East and the West, and America wants to kill Russia. America doesn't give a fuck about Russia. America cares about Russia as a petrol station. That's America's interaction with Russia, is that they just want to dig shit out of the ground and send it to places, right? That's America does not give a single fuck about Russia, other than when it's causing an existential, like, international diplomatic crisis in the invasion of a neighboring country. And then America goes, fine, fuck, well, I guess we better get involved. I don't think Joe Biden was sitting there plotting going, oh, how can we take down Vladimir Putin? Like, if this hadn't have happened, Russia would be the minor player on the world stage that it has been for the last 20 years. Like, no one's interested in fucking with Russia, but he's got to frame it in this grand narrative of like, it's the outsiders attacking us, and like, we're the underdogs. And like, that's
I think nationalism, right? He has to do that because he's just recruited 300,000 people, and they need a reason to want to fight, right? And also to protect his own political, sphere. If he doesn't make it sound like it's justified, why are you recruiting 300,000 people. Like,
so,
it's
are we admitting that there's a war happening now? Because like previously
yes,
to this,
yeah,
like it was just
there's
like,
a war
oh,
happening
it's
now.
not a war, it's a
Special military operation.
interwoven metal structure. It's not a cage. Don't. Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? It's bizarre, and the weirdest thing
out
is
of
that
Russia, by the way, of like it's sold out. Like people are trying to get out now. To prevent it.
Now they're trying to get out. Before the last 6 months of war weren't enough to convince you that this guy's an insane dictator. It's the most unhinged thing is when he talked about using nuclear weapons and things like that. It's like and saying that he wasn't bluffing, which does sound like the sort of thing that someone who's bluffing would say about using nuclear weapons. But like, there is no scenario where Putin can set off nukes and the whole world doesn't coalesce against them. You know what I mean? Like, that is a crystallizing moment like, that is a historical moment if that happens. And there's no way of winning the war from that vantage point if he actually uses nuclear weapons. Like, if he uses nukes, then everyone's like, great, now we've got an excuse to take this guy out. You know what I mean? Like, up until this point, it's just kind of been like this existential story, this sort of proxy conflict playing out on the border of Ukraine and Russia. But if it was actually to do something like, set off nuclear bombs, then it becomes a whole different historical, like World War II level struggle. You know what I mean?
The thing is, he's threatening nukes, but he hasn't specified like what targets would you use?
What sort of
would
nukes?
you use? Like,
is it a little baby nuke or is it a big nuke?
Like, why would you bother using the nuke? Like, what are you trying to destroy? What is the need? Why is there a need for a nuclear weapon? Like, it would be completely illogical to use nukes. I don't think you would, but unless, of course, NATO armies start marching over the border. But I don't think that's going to happen either.
No, they're not interested. They don't want to. Here's the thing, Russia, you're not under attack. No one wants to attack you. You started this. It's like the bully that starts punching the little kid in the head. And then the adults come over and go, hey, what's going on here? And he just goes, oh, I'm being attacked. Little Billy with the broken legs started attacking me. Like, it's not credible.
And the thing is with these 300,000 troops, they're going to take weeks, if not months, to actually train up, get them onto the line, mobilize them properly, equip them. Maybe weeks at best, right? So by that point, if the Ukrainians can keep pushing, then they may well lose Carlsen.
It's one thing being conscripted into a war that you feel is just. Like, I think people in the Americas in the 1930s and 40s who were conscripted felt like, not all of them, obviously, but like, I'm sure a large portion of them felt like, hey, we're helping to defeat the Nazis, who are like literally pure evil. Like, there was a sense of mission about the thing. It's like, if you'd just been some guy who was just like a Twitch streamer and you're like 26 in Russia and you get called up to fight in some unjust war where you're invading another country under very flimsy pretext. Like, I just can't imagine those people are going to be motivated in the same way as people defending their homeland.
In Australia, it's always been conscription's always been the two times I think that we've used it, so World War One and Vietnam, they were pretty divisive. Because by the time we actually got around to conscription in World War One, like, it was like 2017 or something. So not 2017, it was 1917. So it was like things were going badly, and people could see that they were going badly. So people, weren't that supportive of the war by that point. And then obviously Vietnam was, a complete fucking catastrophe. So no one really wanted to do that either. But
you don't conscript people if you've got a healthy pipeline of incoming soldiers. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like you only conscript if things are going poorly, right?
Yeah. But that's also how the Russian reserve system works. So they've got a 2 million reserve army, but I think a lot of that is just, we can equip 2 million people and give them a gun, basically.
Also, they thought, I think the Russian appraisals of what they can actually equip their soldiers with don't necessarily line up with reality. Like, we heard a couple of weeks ago that they're literally like running out of ammunition to fire at the Ukrainians and things like that. There's shortages, supply chain issues strike again. it's. I don't see it. I don't see how this could possibly end well for Putin.
I mean, it could be just the fall of his effective dictatorship potentially if it keeps going badly. I
Because
mean,
it doesn't feel like the country wants to be at war. It feels
No.
like Putin wants to go to war, and so the country's at war. That's what it feels like. Like,
yeah,
this is a war of like one man's will, essentially.
I mean, there are other arguments. We could get into the whole like historical. Has NATO pushed too far, and should we? Is there a utilitarian viewpoint to just let Russia get what they want in order to preserve life?
No, because
it's not.
You're sounding a lot like Neville Chamberlain there, buddy. No. We'll just let him take the Alps, and then he'll be fine.
You can have Czechoslovakia. But there are other modes of ethical thinking that say that this is completely wrong, and they're probably the ones we should stick to. But anyway, so that's happening in Ukraine. How much time? What are we running at now, George? Where are we going?
We've got exactly 1 hour, so we can blow through these next two real quick. So we were talking about America there, and it turns out America strikes again. America, like Australia, is dealing with its own struggles regarding inflation. So inflation, for those who don't know, first of all, welcome to the podcast. You couldn't possibly have listened to previous episodes of this show and not know what inflation is. But inflation is the rate at which goods and services increase in price. And obviously, since the pandemic, and all of the stimulus measures and various other things, supply chain issues, inflation has been increasing steadily for the last year or so. And it's proven to be a real concern around things like interest rates. So the way the Reserve Bank of Australia handles high inflation, you want to target that inflation rate at around 2 to 3% per year in order to not break other areas of the economy. And so what the Reserve Bank of Australia does is it dictates the supply of money to financial institutions and the rate at which they lend that money out to their customers. So say, for example, NAB borrows some money from the RBA and then lends it out to people. The rate that the RBA sets dictates how much those end customers of NAB end up paying for those loans. So chiefly this impacts mortgage rates, so how much you pay for your house. And the theory is, if inflation's running hot, the prices of goods are going up. There's too much money chasing too few goods. There's a few things you can do. You can increase the supply of those goods. That's sort of outside the remit of the RBA. Or if you're the RBA, you can change the rates. So you can increase the cost of capital, that mortgage rate. Your monthly mortgage goes from $2,000 to $2,300 a month. You've got less disposable income to pump out into the economy, and therefore inflation gets controlled that way. Hopefully you get a soft landing, which is where you don't tank the entire economy. Now, this is all sort of undermined by the fact that something that I've been made aware of just recently this week is that there is a certain, these factors, like what I just described, is a very like closed loop system. But obviously financial markets are international, and what happens in America also affects other countries like Australia. And and what they're seeing now is inflation is still sort of out of control in America. They're wanting to continue to raise rates up from historically low levels, and they're wanting to continue to do that for at least the next sort of 6 months, it seems like. And what that means is if there's a differential in our currencies, if the American dollar is worth less and the Australian dollar is all of a sudden worth more to Americans, then that essentially has an inflationary effect on Australia, right? If the cost of goods coming from America to Australia is more because of that currency difference, that affects our inflation figures. Does that make sense? So if a car that you're getting from America was 10 grand and now it's 15 grand due to the change in currency, then that equates to Australian inflation. Am I explaining that well?
Yes. It's very boring, but you are explaining it well.
But essentially what it made me aware of is that there's this currency risk between different countries that affects our inflation. So it might be that we get our internal Australian economic inflation under control. But due to
it doesn't matter if the Australian dollars, that then becomes worth, shit on the dollar, or the US dollar, then
it's all about our relationship to other partners. So, and given that America and China, I suppose as well, are our largest trading partners, what happens there affects us here. So it may be that we get our inflation internally here in Australia under control, and they might still keep raising interest rates because of this differential between the Australian and American economies. And that's terrifying, because what that says to me is that they could completely balk the economy, be really strangling the little baby economy in its crib with high interest rates, and it still may not make a difference. So the interest rates might increase beyond people's capacity to actually pay them back.
It depends. They wouldn't. I mean, if they know it's going to crash the economy, they can't.
But this is the thing.
They would be hesitant.
They're basing it on their best projections, on their best understanding of what's going on. But we all know that the Reserve Bank of Australia has not been exactly forward thinking in its approach to how to approach these issues. Like, even just as recently as the start of this year, the forward guidance from the Reserve Bank was that interest rates would remain at historic lows until 2024. And here we are in 2022, and there's been, I don't know, half a dozen rate rises, something in that effect, in that order of rate rises. There's been, significant rate rises month on month. And there's no indication that it's slowing down anytime soon. So projecting that it could be as high as 6% towards the start of next year, and then hopefully it drops down, but they don't know. And if there's all these other external risk factors, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a problem.
You're a bit worried, mate, because you're buying a house. That's the short answer.
Precisely. Well, the headline of this entire conversation is George is trying to buy a house, and he's really shit scared that he's going to be on the hook for a 6% interest rate, and that's not going to make sense.
I mean, I always think that I'm not a financial expert. I always felt like the interest rates were too low during.
Well, they are, and they've been historically
the last like 10 years. They've just been way too low
over the long arc of history. Interest rates typically hover around the 5% mark.
Yeah.
So
that's probably where they should be sitting, but they got down to, what was it, 0.1% or something?
I think practically, like, what customers are actually paying was around 2%. But yeah, it's historically low. But the problem is, when you push interest rates that low, people take on outsized mortgages because the repayments on those mortgages aren't that bad. So
I think that's just fucked us, really. I think
it's really balked us, because if you've got a $900,000 mortgage and you're paying 2% on that, because the bank will lend it to you and you can make the repayments on 2%, and all of a sudden your interest rate is 6%. So your payment has essentially trebled in the space of a year. Like, that is you're going to have distressed selling. You're going to have people that can't afford their homes anymore having to sell. And obviously prices are going to drop. So because it's this dual thing of, like, we've had these low interest rates that have allowed people to borrow more money, and that's pushed up the price of housing even more. And now they have to take these big mortgages to get into a house. Yeah. Like, it's very silly.
We haven't wanted the bubble to burst for 10 years. And at some point, it may well burst in the next 2-3 years. And if that happens, I kind of just, good. I know it's shit for a lot of people. It's going to be shit for you. Probably shit for me as well, because it'll affect renters, because I'll be selling homes that people are trying to live in.
It's not going to be good for anyone. And I've heard a lot of millennials being like, oh, mate, I can't wait for the housing crash and then I'll finally be able to buy a home. It's like, mate, if the housing market crashes, you're not going to be able to buy shit. Okay, the bank is not going to lend you anything. This is the thing. As interest rates increase, the amount the bank is willing to lend you decreases, because they go, okay, well, you can make the repayments at 2%, but can you make them at 5%? Can you make them at 7%? And if you can't, we're not going to lend you the money in the first place. So as those interest rates go up, people go, oh, great, I'll just borrow $600,000 and buy a home for $600,000. Got a fucking good deal. But that's not going to happen, because no one's going to lend you diddly squat, because that's what happens.
Unless valuations come down drastically. But historically they don't. They might dip by 20%, but they're not going to go any further than that. Unless there's a real
anytime
American style crash where you can buy a house for like $100 or something.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in place. The government has had lots of incentives over time. Anytime that there's just it looks like that bubble's going to pop, they go, here's some bubble sealant. Now you can get into a home with a 5% deposit. Now you can use your super to get into a home. Now you can, like, there's all these little, free market little fuck arounds to try and push more people into the market, which continues to push the price up, which doesn't make any fucking sense.
You got to increase supply. It's the only way to fix it.
Anyway. And you've got a situation where people they've bought into a home, so they paid $1 million for a home. They've got a 5% deposit. It's $50,000. If you need to sell your home because you can't afford the mortgage anymore, and your home is not worth $950, but it's actually worth $800 now, well, you still owe $150,000 to the bank even after your home has been foreclosed on and sold. That's what's called being underwater. So it just
the Australian economy we've become reliant over the last 10 years on property and wealth growth through property, and it's not sustainable.
But it's an asset bubble. People talk about inflation, the price I pay for my cabbage, right, as inflation. And that's a kind of inflation, right? There's also asset price inflation, and we've been happy with that for years and years and years. I can look at my stock portfolio, and my Apple shares are worth, 120 now, and they were worth 110 yesterday, and that's great. That's good for the economy. That's all good. But then as soon as money goes into the hands of real people, and then they actually undertake a real economic activity with it, all of a sudden everything breaks. And it's like, we've been okay with this kind of inflation over here. This bullshit, I'm rich on paper because my bank statement says I've got X amount of millions of dollars in my account. That's completely untethered from the economy. That inflation's fine. But the inflation when,
it's fine. It's fine until it's not. Until you get situations like this, and all of a sudden.
But that's what I'm saying. We were fine with that. We were fine with that before. The price of tulips is just going to go up and up forever. but it impacts the real economy when that bubble inevitably bursts. It's going to break a bunch of other things, and so many industries. Big industries in Australia are tied into the housing market. You've got the banking industry. You've got the construction industry. You've got super funds. You're like institutional investors that are, people's their retirement savings and funds for them to live off are intimately tied in with all of these industries. So,
traditionally, housing has always been a safe asset. But the issue being is and you're a good example because, you sold your house. I'm not going to name the specifics, but
thank you.
There was a significant increase from when you bought it. 4 or 5 years ago?
4 years ago.
And that's unsustainable in the long run. It's not it doesn't. People's ability, wages aren't increasing at that rate.
No,
it's not like there's more money just cycling around for that just to go on forever.
It just feels like fake money just swirling around in the economy, just bullshit nonsense money that's not tethered to anything. And yes, it's like, okay, it's good. I made a profit on my place. But if the place that I'm then turning around to go and buy is also increased by a substantial amount, then it's like, it doesn't help you. You're just like treading water. Essentially, it's like, okay, the place that I am hoping to buy, right, is worth 10, but 4 years ago it was worth 7. So it's like, yes, I've got more money left over from this sale, but then I need to spend even more money in the next step to buy the next thing. So it's not as though you ever just cash out fine. With profit because you got to put it into the next thing, and it's just like feeding this asset bubble.
If growth is 2%, a couple of percent every year,
you want
then
some growth.
Fine.
Yeah,
you want some growth, but if it's 30% growth, whatever it fucking was during the pandemic, I think it was 10% a year or 20% a year or something ridiculous. That is broken. And the only way to fix it is for governments to start doing
something,
housing,
anything,
housing projects, basically.
Yeah. Don't just push more money into failing assets to prop them up.
Yeah.
You need to do something about, getting more people into housing. You need to build housing.
Yeah. And the problem is with the state governments, they're not allowed to do. Look, they want the bubble to keep going because the longer
because
the bubble
they get land tax, they get stamp duty, they get their tax revenue is directly related to the property market, and so they're disincentivized from building cheap, sustainable, affordable housing because it directly translates into losses into their coffers. But here's the thing: if the whole system collapses and all of your revenue is predicated on an industry that's been decimated, well, you're not going to have revenue in the coffers to then turn around and do something about the crisis that's just occurred. You know what I mean?
It's one of those things where it's the Victoria. We talked about the rail loop and all this other stuff with Victoria last week or the week before, whatever it was. But like the funding for that, part of that is predicated on stamp duty revenue, projections over the next 10 years, whatever it may be. So, if that falls off the wagon, then all of a sudden the Victorian taxpayer is on the hook for,
billions of dollars.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's our economics.
All right.
We're going to end on something a bit more delicious, and that is anal beads.
Thanks for that way of phrasing that. So, American chess virtuoso GOAT, greatest of all time, Magnus Carlsen, has pulled out of a tournament for the first time in his career, and then subsequently, right after that, stunned the sport again by resigning a game after just one move. So, Magnus Carlsen, who was he facing? He was facing the same guy, American 19-year-old Hans Niemann, who is considered to be a little bit of a young virtuoso, maybe a little bit of a young Mozart, but certainly doesn't seem like he would be talented enough to beat Magnus Carlsen. So what's happening? So there was so after that there was a multiple rounds against Magnus Carlsen with this guy Hans Niemann, and Niemann defeated him in a couple of rounds, and basically there's been allegations of cheating. Magnus Carlsen more or less outright saying he was, quote, probably cheating, and so that's why he dropped out of the tournament. And so there's been a number of theories circulating. One popularized by everyone's favorite meme lord, Elon Musk, was that Niemann used vibrating anal beads to help him to get around. Obviously, these chess tournaments, they got very strict requirements. So, you can't bring any communication devices. You can't, metal, they scan you for metal and things like that to avoid.
Pat you down.
Sure. And so there's a theory circulating that there's some sort of vibrating anal bead communication situation going on there. Now, there's no evidence to suggest that that's the case, but it is possible that he was cheating. Now, another complicating factor to this is that Niemann has admitted to cheating in the past, which does make it seem
on chess.com though, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, so he's saying, no, that was when I was a kid. It was a huge mistake, but I'm not cheating now, I promise. More likely, I think there's probably someone on Magnus Carlsen's team that's like leaking his, maybe his strategy or his because that's a really big part of like professional chess. If you're a grandmaster or the GOAT, like Magnus Carlsen is, you've got a whole entourage of like people who are also, like retired grandmasters and things like that you basically work with, that you strategize with, that you sharpen your skills against, things like that. And if one of those people is being paid off by, someone else to divulge strategy, that's a huge vulnerability. And these chess tournaments are no joke. Like this Sequenfield Cup that we were talking about earlier is worth $500,000. Like this is real money. It's a legit, I don't know if you call it a sport, but it's a legit entertainment endeavor, and they take it really seriously. Now, after they instituted additional anti-cheating precautions, including a 15-minute delay in the broadcast of the moves and increased radio frequency identification checks, Niemann, who had won 2 of his first 3 games, proceeded to lose or draw his final 6. So even though they didn't find evidence of cheating, like as soon as they stepped up the anti-cheating protocols, all of a sudden he started losing pretty handily. Now, it's possible that the 19-year-old just got like super lucky, but the guy's Magnus Carlsen. It's like playing tennis with Roger Federer or something like that. Like you don't really just get lucky against Magnus Carlsen. The guy's literally like, he's the Serena Williams of chess. There has been no one historically. It's like, this guy's Mozart for chess. Like he is the GOAT. So yeah, it's
watch Queen's Gambit and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And
I haven't actually seen Queen's Gambit.
Haven't you watched Queen's Gambit? Watch Queen's Gambit, man.
I gotta watch it.
Makes you want to just like gives you a hard on for chess. It's great. It's all fictional. There's no way related to anything that's happening here. But definitely good. There was allegedly an offer put out to Niemann to play naked. I think someone offered him $1 million.
He offered to play naked to show that there were no anal beads. He said, I'm happy to play naked. You can fucking pat me down, get in there, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And then so I guess some rich person offered him money to do it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically, they will only find it of Niemann naked. That's going to be a really difficult Google search. Let's see what happens.
That's going to be
No,
rough.
okay, do give me the news. Rising US chart. Yeah, I think he offered to play naked, but someone said they'd give him $1 million. I'm not sure who it was, but anyway, fun times. I don't know. What do you think? Like, how would you make vibrating anal beads work in that context?
Here's the thing: how would you be able to
one vibrate for yes, two vibrates for no?
Yeah, you're sort of like holding the chess piece over a spot, and it's like, no, okay, not there, not there. Yeah, it's like, how would that actually be able to communicate any useful information? I have no idea. But like, chess AIs are so good now that if you can communicate with someone in the chair, you can sway a match even against like grandmasters. That's how good AI technology has gotten. So, yeah, it's not clear whether he was cheating, but I just thought vibrating chess anal beads were an excellent way to finish the episode.
I agree.
So if you've got any theories,
pick some up on Amazon right now.
So if you've got any theories about 19-year-old American Hans Niemann and how he might be using various implements to cheat at chess, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Please email us.
Is this just a deliberate Streisand effect?
What do you mean?
To like get people into playing chess again?
I don't think so. I think Magnus Carlsen's legitimately pissed about it. But I mean, yeah, how much of it is like publicity and sort of, creating a fake crisis out of nothing to sort of big up the sport? I don't know. I certainly don't think anal beads are involved. I think that's reaching even for Elon Musk. But if you've got any alternate theories as to how you would decide to win a game against Magnus Carlsen, please email us, unnaturalselectionshow@gmail.com, titling your email, "This is how I would beat Magnus Carlsen," with anal beads or without anal beads or whatever you.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well, I've got to get my chess implements ready for after the show. Thanks for listening, guys. We love your faces. Oh no, I should do the. How do I end the show? How do I know?
I don't know. How do you normally do it? I don't know. There's a. Thanks for listening.
Yep.
We are something.
Oh yeah, no, I got it. Thanks for listening. We have been, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Please make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And you can follow us all down to the Cinquefield Cup to wash off some unrelated anal beads. Thanks for listening to not wash. You know what I'm saying, or do you? Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. Adam's giving me a look. We will see you. Please let me end the show. We will see you next week.
I'm not saying anything, man. You're just walking into that one yourself.
No, I did that. Ask first.
Yeah.